Good day to you. Hope you're having a wonderful day. We are reading in the book of Mark, the Gospel of Mark. We're ready to read chapter 15. Now we're reading for context, to understand the events, to know what's happening, and to understand what is being said, and to try to see how to apply that to us. So definitely we want to read and understand the events, read and understand what is being said, and then, if possible, we want to apply that to us in our lives. This is totally like unscripted. I don't really prepare things ahead of time. I just basically sit down with the Bible and read. We just finished chapter 14, where Jesus had told the no, wait, let me see. We just finished chapter 14 where Peter had denied that he knew Jesus, and the cock had crowed, and he broke down and wept. So this is chapter 15, verse 1. And as soon as it was morning, the chief priests held a consultation with the elders and scribes and the whole council, and they bound Jesus and led him away and delivered him over to Pilate. And Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" And he answered him, "You have said so." And the chief priests accused him of many things, and Pilate again asked him, "Have you no answer to make? See how many charges they bring against you." But Jesus made no further answer, so that Pilate was amazed. I'm reading the heading. That's not an actual verse. So verse 5, but Jesus made no further answer, so that Pilate was amazed. Now verse 6, now at the feast he used to release for them. Okay, they're talking about Pilate. Now at the feast he used to release for them one prisoner for whom they asked. And among the rebels in prison who had committed murder in the insurrection, there was a man called Barabbas. And the crowd came up and began to ask Pilate to do as he usually did for them. And he answered them, saying, "Do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews?" For he perceived that it was out of envy that the chief priests had delivered him up. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have him release for them Barabbas instead. And Pilate again said to them, "Then what shall I do with the man you call the king of the Jews?" And they cried out again, "Crucify him." And Pilate said to them, "Why, what evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Crucify him." So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released for them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified. Now you notice here, Pilate is really antagonizing the priests, and I think a little bit the crowd, because knowing that the Jews did not have a king at this time, and knowing that they would have wanted a king, they were looking for a Messiah that was, not what Jesus was. They didn't understand what was going on, and anyway, he was kind of antagonizing the chief priests and the council. He probably did not get along with them. They had to come to Pilate. Pilate was, I think, in control of that region for Rome. Anyway, so and the soldiers led him away inside the palace, that is the governor's headquarters, and they called together the whole battalion, and they clothed him in a purple cloak, and twisting together a crown of thorns, they put it on him, and they began to salute him, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And they were striking his head with a reed, and spitting on him, and kneeling down in homage to him. And when they had mocked him, they stripped him of the purple cloak, and put his own clothes on him, and they led him out to crucify him. These are things, the scourging, all these things that happen to Jesus here. These are things that are mentioned in Isaiah in one way or another. They're mentioned in other places in the Old Testament. It's truly bad, the things that he went through. I'm sure it was much worse. This is like a short little summary of what he went through. And the things he went through, and he suffered all this for us. So it's just something to remember and think about. I think there's a reason it's not gone into in great detail, but at the same time, it's something to remember that he went through all of this for us. So, verse 21, let me try to keep us in place here. And they compelled a passerby, Simon of Cyrene, who was coming in from the country, the father of Alexander and Rufus, to carry his cross. And they brought him to the place called Golgotha, which means place of a skull. And they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. And they crucified him and divided his garments among them, casting lots for them to decide what each should take. And it was the 3rd hour when they crucified him, and the inscription of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." And with him they crucified 2 robbers, one on his right and one on his left. And those who passed by derided him, wagging their heads and saying, "Ah, you who would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself and come down from the cross." And so also, no, there's no "and" there, I'm sorry. Verse 31, so also the chief priests and the scribes mocked him to one another, saying, "He saved others, he cannot save himself. Let the Christ, the King of Israel, come down now from the cross, that we may see and believe." Those who were crucified with him also reviled him. So, here again, they're mocking and they're making fun of it, but they say, "Let the Christ, the King of Israel, come down from the cross that we may see." And he had already said there would be no sign except for his death and resurrection. And they didn't understand. They didn't know they didn't get that that's what was going to happen. And when the 6th hour had come, there was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour. And at the 9th hour, Jesus cried with a loud voice. We're going to do the best we can here. "Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And some of the bystanders, hearing it, said, "Behold, he is calling Elijah." And someone ran and filled a sponge with sour wine, put it on a reed, and gave it to him to drink, saying, "Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to take him down." And Jesus uttered a loud cry and breathed his last. And the curtain of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. And when the centurion who stood facing him saw that in this way he breathed his last, he said, "Truly, this man was the Son of God." It's funny that the centurion is the one that, seeing this, says, "Truly, this man was the Son of God." Now, Jesus is saying, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Now, that harkens back to an old psalm. Let me see if my Bible gives me the reference, because it's meant, it's Psalm 22:1, where that psalm begins with, my God, why have you forsaken me?" And this is, it's a couple of different things. It's to call people's attention to this, the fact that this was the prophecy and that he is fulfilling the prophecy. And because that was another prophetic psalm that relates to Jesus. And it is a psalm of David. Anyway, so it's just calling back to another prophecy, and it's something that Jesus knowingly did to remind them, and also to fulfill, again, fulfilling the prophecy, fulfilling what was supposed to happen. In part of that psalm, down around verse 18, they divided my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. So it was a prophecy of Jesus being on the cross and being crucified. And it's just something to think about and be aware of, that he was prophesied so many times in so many ways, and here with basically his last breath and his last words here, he's still fulfilling the prophecy and reminding everyone of the prophecy, and that he is the Messiah and that he's fulfilling that. And they do cast lots for it. They divide his clothing and they cast lots for his clothing both. So that's part of the prophecy as well. And let's see, the curtain of the temple was what separated people from the Ark of the Covenant and where the Spirit of God was. The reason the curtain was ripped, well, first it's ripped from top to bottom, which I think has some significance in and of itself, because a man could not rip it from top to bottom, but it was ripped from top to bottom, and the Spirit of God no longer resided with the death of Jesus. Jesus changed everything. The Spirit of God no longer resided in the temple and in the Ark of the Covenant, but instead the Spirit of God resides within all of us. The Holy Spirit, you understand, and he leads and guides us into all things and all wisdom. He's also the Comforter, as Jesus said, to help us get through the things we must get through every day. So that's why that is there, and if it's not in every account, it's in most of the gospel accounts that occurred, and that's because it's significant. Up until Jesus, the Spirit of God had resided in the Ark of the Covenant and was in the temple, but no longer was that going to be the case. That was never going to be again, that God would just have his Spirit reside in one place like that for just one group of people. And now his Spirit was going to be free and to everyone who would believe. So alright, so verse 40, let me make sure I get us lined up correctly. Oh, this is the end of the chapter. Okay, verse 40. There were also women looking on from a distance, among whom were Mary Magdalene, and Mary the mother of James the younger, and of Joses, and Salome. When he was in Galilee, they followed him and ministered to him, and there were also many other women who came up with him to Jerusalem. And when evening had come, since it was the day of preparation, that is, the day before the Sabbath, Joseph of Arimathea, a respected member of the council, who was also himself looking for the kingdom of God, took courage and went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. See, Jesus' ministry was for everybody. If we back up to verse 40 and 41, and there were women there who understood the message and believed, and they were followers of Jesus as well. And that should be noted. That shouldn't be ignored. Yes, it was primarily a male-dominated society, as most societies have been, and just from customs and the way society is, that's a fact. But notice that there were plenty of women who followed Jesus who understood the message as well. We shouldn't discount that or think that didn't happen, but we do have to understand the society was different. Just like we have to understand it's not right, not that it was right, and it's not that it's okay, but there were slaves in the Roman Empire. There were a lot of slaves. People were enslaved a lot. It could be you were enslaved because you were in too much debt and you couldn't pay it back. But it also could mean, as the Romans conquered areas, that they took certain numbers of people slaves sometimes. It just depended. So slaves were not unheard of, and that's why the Bible does mention stuff about slaves sometimes. It was because it was a fact of life. It's not that it condoned slavery. No one would want someone else to be a slave, but it was a fact of life in those times. And even now, we work for other people. We're servants for other people, and we just get paid to do it. We're not truly slaves, but at the same time, we have to work for somebody to make some money unless you have your own business. If you have your own business, then that's good. You're working for yourself, but you're still working for somebody to try to provide an income and make an income. So, it's just a fact of life. It doesn't mean that it's the best or the worst. We know slavery is wrong and bad, but that was just a fact of life back then. The Bible doesn't condone slavery. It just admits that it existed. And there's a difference. Alright. So then you'll also notice in verse 42 and 43 that Joseph of Arimathea was a respected member of the council. There were members of the council and the ruling body and the elders and even of the Pharisees and stuff that believed that Jesus was from God and that he was the Messiah. And here was one such person, and you notice he took courage. It took courage to go and ask for the body of Jesus, because he could have been associated with that in a bad way and gotten into trouble himself. But that didn't happen. Pilate was surprised to hear that he should have already died. And summoning the centurion, he asked him whether he was already dead. And when he learned from the centurion that he was dead, he granted the corpse to Joseph. And Joseph bought a linen shroud, and taking him down, wrapped him in the linen shroud, and laid him in a tomb that had been cut out of the rock. And he rolled a stone against the entrance of the tomb. Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of Joseph, saw where he was laid. So, and this is just an accounting at that point. Now Pilate was surprised to hear that Jesus had already died. So I don't know if they expected him to, hang on for longer or what. But I don't know. I'm not sure if I understand that, but he was surprised to hear that he had already died. I guess they expected it to last longer, but I don't know how that would necessarily be, depending, on how somebody's treated. But through the punishment he had received and the way he had been treated, I don't know why they would have thought that he would have lasted longer. I don't think that everyone who was crucified was necessarily treated exactly the same way. But I don't know. Again, I don't know. Anyway, it sounded like he had gone through plenty, and maybe they thought he would hang on and live longer, but he did not. So Joseph bought a linen shroud. Now that shroud is, that's one of those where they refer to the Shroud of Turin, if you've heard of that. And they think they carbon dated it. Of course, now I will tell you that carbon dating is not always as accurate as they wish it was, and it's still kind of theoretical in a way. It's very hard to prove something like that is absolutely, correct, and that it is always going to get a correct reading. There's just a lot of variables in that. It's not that it can't be used to get like a ballpark of things if you do multiple tests and kind of see what your average is. But if you do, if you don't do a lot of tests and kind of get a feel for what you're testing and how it's coming out, then your tests are subject to, well, to being false, to just being inaccurate. Anyway, so they've tested that. I don't know that that's true, if it's a real thing or not. If is it a painting or is it not? But I would imagine for the resurrection there was a lot of power involved in that. But would that have been something that would have created a symbol like the Shroud of Turin? I have no idea. I just don't know. But just thought, since it's mentioned here, I just thought I would mention it, and say that I have no idea if that's real or not at all. Just it seems unlikely, but does it matter? No, we don't need that anyway. We have the Word of God that tells us all we need. We don't need to have that as a what would they call it, as a relic or as a sign. We don't need that. We have the Word of God, and that's all the sign we need. But just wanted to mention it since it's mentioned here, and I think that's referred to as the Shroud of Turin, that they believe that has, like that almost. It's almost like a photographic negative image, of Jesus' body after he was crucified, when he was entombed. So anyway, let's see. So he was definitely put in a tomb that was carved into the rock, and they rolled a stone against the entrance of the tomb. Now, it wouldn't have been a teeny tiny stone. It would have been a pretty big stone. So just for reference there. Alright, so that is the end of chapter 15, and when next I come back, we will read chapter 16, and that will be the final chapter of Mark, and then we will continue on to the Gospel of Luke. So thank you for listening, and God bless you.